Hi, morena everyone. My name is Delwyn Stewart. I am a Global Women member and lead the YWCA in Auckland. And last year we launched a new initiative called the Y25 across the whole country, really in response to some research that we had done that said only about a quarter of our young women feel that their opinions count. And we noticed that there's a real lack of visibility for young women. So what we wanted to do was to reach out, find out what our young women are doing, create a platform for them to speak in an unfiltered way and to share what their lived experience is. And it's been a hugely successful program. We had so many fantastic nominations and just ended up with 25 fabulous young women. Very hard to choose just four for today, but we do have four fabulous young women. So I'm going to stop talking now and hand over to these girls, and they'll introduce themselves and have a little korero. Handing over to you, Eri.
Good morning and welcome to the Global Women Gen Z Insights panel. It is extremely awesome to be here with you all this morning. Before I continue, I just wanted to quickly thank both the YWCA and Global Women for having us this morning. Both organizations play an instrumental role in women's development all across Aotearoa. So yeah, I know we're all super excited. My name is Iri Harpati Edwards. I am co-hosting with the amazing Sophie, Courtney, and Tulsi, who you'll get to hear from in just a moment. To introduce myself, as I said, I'm Iri Harpati Edwards. I am 21 years old, and I am a financial consultant. I've had the unique privilege of completing work and education experience across 4 continents, including, of course, Oceania, North America, Asia, and South America, where I worked and lived as a international relations analyst in Medellin, Colombia. Some of my key interests include education, women's rights, Indigenous rights, all of which kind of interconnect and intersect. So I'm really, really looking forward to chatting with these amazing wāhine toa this morning. And so I will pass it over to the amazing Sophie Handford.
Kia ora te whānau, ko Sophie Handford tōku ingoa. I'm 19 years of age and I live in Pakikariki, which is a small seaside village about an hour north of Wellington City. My kind of involvement in activism and my journey a lot of it has been through School Strike for Climate. So at the beginning of last year, I founded School Strike for Climate Aotearoa off the back of the kind of global movement that was sparked by the actions of Greta Thunberg, a Swedish teenager who's only 17 now. And from there, that led us to having 170,000 people all across Aotearoa standing united for climate justice in September last year. And from there, kind of tapping into my why of wanting to be able to get to the end of my life and say that I did everything in my power and used my voice to its full potential to speak up for our planet. I then decided to run for council. So I'm now actually sitting in the Mayor's office, the Kapiti Coast District Council Mayor's office while I do this SUI because I've just ducked out of a council briefing. And I'm now elected representative for the Pakikariki Raumati ward and have the portfolios of climate and youth. So my kind of kaupapa and the things that I'm most passionate about is how that we as young women and as young people in general can use our unique perspective in relation to some of the challenges, but also opportunities that we're facing to be able to influence and feed into the conversation and actually lead the conversation. So I'm just really keen to, see how many people we can get on board this awesome journey that we all need to be a part of to protect our papatoanuku, but also to stand up for our people. So kia ora, thanks, Iri.
Awesome. And now we will move over to Tulsi.
Kia ora everyone, my name is Tulsi Lathia and I am 19 years old. I'm based here down south in Christchurch and I'm the co-author of a multicultural cookbook called Spoonful Spice that aims to bridge the cultural gap that my team and I perceive to be present here in New Zealand, which is a disconnect between the Kiwis who have lived here for generations, and those who are more new to New Zealand and coming over because of other disrupts in the world. And we have used food as a medium to build connections between different people in our community. And through our book, we've managed to collect donations that will go back to the community and helping refugees in Christchurch specifically at this time. Apart from that, I'm also very passionate about innovation and tech, which is very different to Spoonful of Spice. But through that, I've taken part in several international innovation competitions and challenges, which I enjoy very much. Currently, I'm studying towards a Bachelor of Commerce here at the University of Christchurch, University of Canterbury, sorry. And I'm very passionate about getting more women into business, especially migrant women, because I have seen that there is kind of a stigma around women who don't have the skills going into business, whereas they have different types of skills that they can use towards business. So I'm very passionate about working in my community at the moment and getting more women involved in business. And I'm so excited to see what we get up to chatting about today.
Oh, kia ora, Tulsi. And last but not least, we have Courtney Davies.
Kia ora everyone, my name is Courtney. I am from the lovely Dairy Flat just north of Auckland, and my primary interests lie around agriculture, especially around youth governance and getting young people involved. I really like the idea of refreshing governance to be more representative of the people that we're trying to support, especially in the primary industry. So my background in university, I've got a Master of Natural Sciences and Microbiology, so really research focused, but I'm looking at combining that with a lot of business, management, governance, especially in the not-for-profit area. So I really enjoy creating opportunities, groups of young people in the agricultural region, but I also work full-time at the non-profit charity Blake, so formerly the Sir Peter Blake Trust. Last year as an environmental educator, where we reached over 25,000 young people from throughout Auckland, teaching them about ocean sustainability in the marine environmental scope, but also moving on this year to around logistics and creating a lot more sort of high impact programs for leadership, recognizing our young people in society and just really creating opportunities and letting young people take over the reins. So that's me.
Wow, fantastic. So obviously we're in the presence of some pretty amazing wāhine toa. And I thought we could kick off this morning by talking a little bit about 2020. So obviously it's been a super challenging year for all of us. And I want to talk a little bit about how we've found this year, maybe some of the challenges that we've encountered and what we'd kind of like to see moving forward. So I'm going to direct this first question to you, Sophie, and then we can all kind of chime in with our thoughts about how we've felt about this very massive year.
Oh, it's been a bit of a roller coaster, eh? There've definitely been moments where huge challenges, but then again, I feel so lucky to have been in lockdown in the beautiful village of Pakakiriki, surrounded by my friends and my whānau, and to not have faced a whole lot of adversity through the lockdown. And I know that for some, that definitely wasn't the case, where the home wasn't the kind of environment that was safe for them to be in during lockdown, or they didn't have the kind of support around them that they needed to, support their whānau during that period of time. So I definitely feel, really privileged to have kind of quite enjoyed lockdown. And it sounds weird to say, but a lot of the time during lockdown gave me space to reflect and to really realise the importance of connections and relationships, and that was kind of what got our community through it. So I think for me, the reflection of that was that people, were able to live locally. People worked from home. We reduced our emissions here in Kapiti by 40%. People shopped locally. They supported local businesses. They supported each other. I was part of setting up a self-isolation support group. So we did deliveries, around 10 grocery deliveries each day. And I also was part of a team that managed to sew over 150 reusable masks for people in our community. So all of those things where people were donating fabric, donating time, donating money for petrol, donating kai, those things I think we really saw come to the forefront during lockdown. And I don't think we can afford to lose that sense of community and that sense of resilience that then brings for us as we do kind of approach some of these huge challenges such as the climate crisis. I think another thing that reflecting on it for me was that we're kind of short of avenues, for people to access hope, because I think some people during lockdown had those kinds of avenues, or those people and those connections where they could get hope from, where they could kind of find stability, but for others that was so much more challenging. And I think those kind of avenues for young people, but people of all generations, to have access to some form of hope, whether that's just through a relationship or a connection, or whether that's through someone in their community who can support them. Because I think for a lot of the mahi that I've done over the last couple of years, it's been out of a sense of fear, but I'm no longer in a space where I want that to be the case. I want it to be out of a sense of hope and of love for what could be if we really embraced some of the learnings, I think, that came with lockdown. So I'm really keen to see how we can tap into those positives of the ways in which our community supported each other, but also the benefits to our planet. It shouldn't take a loss of, those 25 lives for us to realise or for us to notice some of those changes that we saw, those positive changes for our environment. I think, we have to just truly embrace some of the things that we did and some of the ways of living and working to recognise that that's potentially the future. So those learnings, I'm just keen to see how we can continue that conversation of the new normal and not let it drop off.
Absolutely. And, I think we all know that 2020 has been radically different to any year before it. What about you, Courtney, Tulsi? Have you found, how have you found navigating this kind of new normal?
I think it's been a really interesting opportunity, and even just echoing and acknowledging what Sophie was just saying around the lockdown. I think this is a really good opportunity to give a massive shout out to our farmers and those who continue to work and to provide us with that food, because while a lot of businesses and companies could no longer operate in what we consider a normal, we still had our farmers going out milking our cattle, providing us with really high quality produce from New Zealand. And I think it gave us an opportunity to innovate and think a little bit more carefully about how we do things. We needed to be a lot more efficient and just really tap into those key innovations that New Zealand is really, really famous for, and that we know that we can do really well. So although we're moving into this new normal, I think definitely reflecting back and acknowledging the work that the people have done throughout all of the industries throughout lockdown, but definitely some of our farmers, I think often they're overshadowed. So yeah, I think building on that and even tying into those ideas around how can we support our primary industries through this different, navigating this new sort of climate, this new normal, and what sort of regulations do we need, what regulations do we need to perhaps ease back on, and just thinking about how we can really work in with the governance sector around politics, essentially, to make sure we can still keep promoting and creating these really awesome products.
Yep, absolutely. And what about you, Tulsi?
Yeah, I think that the lockdown really brought a sense of kind of appreciation for workers that we haven't appreciated necessarily in the past. Like especially retail workers at grocery stores, they've had to risk their lives so that everyone can get what they need to survive this lockdown and be, content with what they need to survive, essentially. Because in other countries, looking at the global perspective, they've had places where it's really hard to access food and basic resources like water, because they want to not get the disease, but also be able to live normally. So yeah, it's been a huge challenge worldwide, but I'm glad that in New Zealand we've managed to make some, see some pockets of brightness in the bit of a mess.
Absolutely. And I want to support all those different perspectives, because they're all super important. I think for myself personally, 2020, it's been interesting, but if we're talking about COVID, for example, I was over in the United States when we had the first wave, and so obviously it was a very tumultuous time and a very interesting place to be experiencing COVID. I think there was a lot of anxiety, there was uncertainty, and I know we all kind of feel that, but I want to kind of acknowledge it, because kind of what Sophie was connecting to about the aspect of hope. It's a strange time. We kind of have to reach out to one another. And I know for myself, when I was over in the United States, I really miss my family. I really miss that connection. And so I think kind of as, role models, leaders, people in our community, it's really important that we do normalize, reaching out and essentially supporting those people that, you've talked about, Courtney, Tulsi, Sophie. So yeah, I think that was some great answers. And talking about this new normal, I kind of want to talk about how work and productivity sort of fits into that new normal. So passing it over to you, Courtney, what are some of your perspectives about how we can navigate the new normal in terms of work?
I think at the end of the day, it all boils back to the idea that whether we're working self-employed, whether we've got our own side hustle, whether we're working for someone else. And I think we want to be as productive as possible. We want to be getting as many outputs as we can. But at the same time, our employers are starting to recognize that working doesn't necessarily mean from 9 to 5 in an office space. It can be wherever, whenever. And like you were saying, Iri, that you could be working overseas, we could be working outside of home. And I'm really grateful that my company has really increased our flexibility and has let us work from home or wherever we are. And I think at the end of the day, that makes me even more excited to get back to work and to get to do things, because I know that I'm probably not speaking for myself when I say that I can't just switch on at 9 o'clock and work all the way through to 5 o'clock and then switch off. My productivity sort of ebbs and flows throughout the day, and there'll be a really exciting burst of energy in the evening where I just want to get out and get a project done. And then throughout the day, other things you can really sort of build on. So I definitely think that it's been a good opportunity, even going back to the idea of innovation, to think, how can we do things a little bit better? How can we be a little bit more productive? And what can we really do? And how does that work for us? And it's really great to see that a lot of our New Zealand companies are supporting that. As long as the work gets done, it's not really a matter of where it needs to get done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What about you, Sophie?
Oh, yeah, I was just making some notes of what Courtney was saying, because a lot of those were golden nuggets, I think, of things that if we continue carrying through this conversation, but also to the rest of our communities and people who might not be on this call, that's awesome too. For me, kind of touching on the first question as well, the ability that lockdown, or the space that lockdown created for me to reflect. I think I spent a lot of the time in lockdown kind of thinking about how I'm being intentional about what I'm working on, and whether that's my paid mahi or whether that's kind of volunteer work, but just figuring out where I'm putting my energy. And I think for a lot of people that I've spoken with, that was quite a similar kind of internal dialogue that they had going on about, you know, having a whole lot more time in the day, because, you know, not having to travel to meetings an hour away, but instead just being able to jump on Zoom and go from one to the next, and then being able to spend more time with whānau and going for walks on the beach and connecting with nature and having more time and space for that. I think that gave a lot of space to kind of, for people to reflect about what role work plays in their life, and actually that work is only one part of our lives, and there are other facets of our lives too, such as our volunteer mahi, the work that we do in our communities, the role that we play in our families, the roles that we play in our friend groups, and all of those different aspects too. So I think the future of work in that sense is kind of like, maybe work becomes a smaller but more connected part of our life to the other aspects of our lives. And not smaller in the sense that we're giving anything up, but just smaller in the sense that, as Courtney was saying, we're being more productive and able to be more intentional about where we're focusing our time and energy. And I think it also made me reflect on how the work that we're all doing enhances people's well-being and resilience. So to say, if another wave of the pandemic hits our shores, and fingers crossed it won't, but how the work that we're doing now in between the first lockdown and the second, and hopefully not a third, but if there is a third. So being really conscious of the kind of work that we're doing and the ways in which we're working to make sure that we're able to adapt and we're able to be agile in the case of another lockdown. And yeah, also the kind of productivity increase, hopefully that we'll continue to see, but also the reduction in emissions that comes from working from home and that new way of using Zoom and not traveling to, you know, conferences overseas or even to Auckland. I made a few trips to Auckland last year, and the kind of guilt that I had to sit with for weeks and months after that, even for the Y25 hui, I was like, oh, it feels like it's really, you know, potentially in like, it's contradicting the things that I'm standing up for. But now being able to do that via Zoom, because that's the way that we've all had to work, has felt quite nice. So many different elements to that. I hope that all makes sense. But yeah, awesome. This is such a good question.
Totally. And what about you, Tulsi? Do you have any sort of resounding thoughts?
So I definitely agree with Sophie, as in how we've changed our perspective on work, as in how much time of our day we allocate to it and how much importance we can give to other stuff as well. Because I feel like before lockdown, being a university student, my whole life kind of just revolved around that. But coming into lockdown, you had more time to give to other things that you cared about, like volunteering. Like I helped deliver some food parcels around Christchurch to the elderly, which is very it's not something you would have thought of like before lockdown, because you never saw a need for that. But yes, it definitely opened up my eyes to other types of work rather than just university or like paid work. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and I definitely want to touch on that whole aspect of other types of work. You know, being a Gen Z Insights panel, this kind of wouldn't be complete without me sort of introducing, you know, this idea that not all of Gen Z are following the conventional pathway of I must go to university, I must get my degree, and then I will be safe. Because, you know, we've witnessed a lot of different things happening recently. And so what I kind of wanted to mention was the way I viewed work when I was 18 is completely different to the way that I view work now. And so I remember I started out working with Deloitte New Zealand. I was a consultant in Deloitte private and share registry sector. And, you know, I thought to myself, yes, like I've made it. I can work my job, my 9 to 5, and that's great. You know, it's not me saying, it's not me discrediting either side, because what I believe is that you can succeed inside and outside of an academic institution. But I think one of the trends we're seeing, especially with Gen Z, is that people are becoming more brave when it comes to stepping out on a new venture. You know, like maybe I want to dedicate a year or so to an important project. And so, yeah, that's what I see. I mean, I feel like I kind of currently represent that other side of the coin, you know, the entrepreneurs and the risk takers. And so, yeah, I definitely want to acknowledge this very Gen Z idea of just believing in your vision, whatever it is. Maybe it's not conventional. And yeah, I totally agree with all those perspectives. And so moving forward, I thought it would be really cool to kind of talk about how maybe older generations can help us sort of move forward and navigate our chosen work or whatever it is, you know. So how can older generations really help us moving forward? We'll start with you, Tulsi.
Sure. So I feel like what I've noticed is older generations, like my mum and her mum, they've had to face different challenges to us because they've lived throughout a different world than we have. And I think what the best thing they can do is help us learn from their mistakes, because making mistakes is not about regretting over them. It's about growing for them and making sure they don't happen again or growing from that. So I think that older generations can definitely help us kind of understand the mistakes they've made and how we can avoid those and how we can build on those, especially with the climate with Sophie. We know that a lot of practices from older generations have impacted what we're facing today. And now we have to move forward because there's no point going on the past and dwelling on that. So I think the biggest learning we could take from older generations is how to kind of move past those mistakes and work together to overcome them, definitely.
Absolutely. What about you, Courtney?
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the main things that I'm the most sort of passionate and driven around sort of supporting is the idea of mentorship and giving young people and giving the next generation a chance. And it doesn't necessarily need to be a young person, but it's someone with a different perspective coming into a conversation. It might be an opportunity to understand. And just because someone disagrees with you, it doesn't mean that one side is right and one side is wrong. And I think it's getting over this sort of biased belief that just because someone doesn't agree with me, then my idea is the only option out there. And I think by including mentorship and bringing in different perspectives, especially at the governance level, especially in the community level, that creates a really, really good opportunity for some extended dialogue and bringing in some new ideas and diversity. And diversity has a lot of different meanings. And for me, it's just the different perspectives. So I think learning from the older generations, if they're able to pass down some of their wisdom and some of their experience, we can definitely grow and draw on that, because a lot of the time in these situations that I know that I've been involved in and a lot of my other fellow wāhine have been involved in, we're involved in groups where people before us have gone in and made something cool, done something cool, and we would assume that they don't want to see that die or drop off. We want to keep building on the work that they've done, but we can only do that with their support and by letting us take a step. And even if we stumble, even if we make a mistake, but knowing that we've got a background or a network to back us up, rather than people just continuously thinking that I have to be the one that does this, making sure it's more of a team effort and letting people take on those ownership tasks. At the end of the day, we're going to be the ones moving through, and we can't do that if we don't have support from the people who have walked before us.
Totally. Yep. Sophie, any
completely total all of that. I think just having an open heart, open mind, and being conscious of the kind of perspectives and voices that are around you. So if you're in a space and you don't have the perspective of a young person, then maybe you have to ask yourself, well, why is that? And what could we do to allow our young people the space? And what could we do to overcome the barriers that young people have to maybe breaking into some of those areas that are currently predominantly occupied by the older generation? So I think that's probably one part that, just to add, but I feel like that's already been touched on. And also, yeah, the point kind of around what Courtney was mentioning around helping us to find but also to open doors. So sometimes I think the older generation is a lot more aware of different opportunities and groups and different spaces that, you know, they've been involved with, but sometimes that information doesn't really make its way to the younger generation, and whether that's through, you know, because the different channels of communication are varied depending on generations. But I think, yeah, just helping and supporting the young people and the young women in your lives to be able to find those doors and kind of help them to open them, so that there's that support for that next generation. And I think if that just continues, then we're really starting to develop those strong intergenerational links, which I think are kind of a little bit missing at the moment. But I think during lockdown, we kind of saw that change a little bit. And as Tulsi was mentioning, around a lot of young people stepping in to support the older generation in their communities, because the older generation were the ones who were the most vulnerable. So I'd add that, and I'd also add that another way to support is to just stand alongside young people in their initiatives. So if you see a young person doing something awesome where you are, just be like, do you need any resource? If you've got anything to offer them, I'm sure that that would be much appreciated. And whether it's, you know, with the School Strike for Climate, we ran all of those strikes on, well, the first two anyway, on less than $500, and then managed to get a little bit more resource for the third one to be able to pay for a better and bigger PA, so that more people could hear the speeches and the message could kind of, yeah, reach further back into the audience. But even something as small as reaching out and saying, well, actually, I've got a bit of money that could help, or I've got this connection that might really support you in what you're doing, or I've got this opportunity that, you know, might open some doors. I think it's just about realizing that probably a lot of you who are listening in have many connections and, you know, potentially some awesome experiences that a young person could really benefit from hearing. So don't be afraid to reach out and offer support, because I know that'll be greatly appreciated by so many.
Absolutely. And, you know, I think we as Gen Z, you know, we value different things. And so that's why I think having those open conversations, that open dialogue with older generations is so important, you know, when it comes to moving forward. And yeah, completely, you guys just nailed it. I couldn't add anything else to that. That was awesome. So I'm about to open the floor up for questions. So if anybody has any questions that are watching, please, you know, you can pop them in the chat. But before I do that, I wanted to talk a little bit about imposter syndrome and anxiety. And again, you know, I think that's really important. We're kind of in an age of isolation somewhat. And so having those conversations about things, you know, like imposter syndrome, like anxiety, I think is really, really important. So I think we'll start with you, Courtney, and then sort of make our way around the room. But yeah.
Definitely, I think it's a really, really important topic. And for me, I'm definitely, for those who know me, I'm not one to talk about my feelings, and I like to sort of appear like I know what I'm doing and just sort of go with the flow. But it was a few years ago at university that I started to sort of doubt myself and think what I'm doing isn't up to scratch, isn't up to speed with the people around me. And it got so bad that I was trying to sort of detract myself out of science meetings, and my work was really starting to suffer. And the more I sort of researched it and had a chat to my supervisor, and she introduced me to this topic around imposter syndrome, and it got me thinking that it's not just me who has this idea of inferiority, and that everyone around us is succeeding, doing awesome things. They're getting A's, they're getting promotions at work, they're getting fantastic opportunities to develop and to explore. And I think imposter syndrome it's a really interesting thing, and there's a really awesome TED talk that I highly recommend if anyone's listening along that they want to have a look at and explore more. It goes into a lot more depth. But for me, imposter syndrome, getting over it is just realizing that my path is going to be different to other people's paths. I'm going to do my own thing at certain points. They're going to do their own thing, and you can't measure success. There's no sort of standard metric of this is success and this isn't success. So for me, I think realizing that and just being sort of true to my own journey, and as cliche as that sounds, understanding what I want to do and how I need to do it. There are going to be speed bumps along the way. There are times where I think, what am I doing? Where am I going? But yeah, imposter syndrome and really sort of overcoming that anxiety has taken a good few years, and there are still moments where I think, oh, how am I here? How am I with this awesome group of young women? Is there a mistake here? Have they sort of needed a pity vote or something like that? And I think situations like that, it takes a long time to really look at yourself deeply and think, no, this is me, I deserve to be here. And I think often with young women, when we have that, when we express that sense of confidence, it's not really perceived well by the people around us who perhaps don't identify as female. They often think that, oh, this is a woman in business, a woman succeeding as a young professional, this is not a right. And I think it's going back and sort of trying to break through some of those old stereotypes and old gender barriers that are really associated, that still sort of come into today's world. You know, imposter syndrome is definitely something that we're trying to get over, but it's always there.
Yeah, no, totally. I think exactly the same. You know, mental health, you know, which is like imposter syndrome, anxiety, depression, you know, it kind of encompasses all of these different things. It's so important. And what I really like about our generation, from what I feel, is that we've become a lot more vocal about, you know, it's okay not to be okay, please reach out. And, you know, seeing different initiatives come out, it's been a really, really, you know, awesome, liberating feeling. I think, you know, for even myself, like perhaps, you know, you guys as well, there's a lot of pressure to always appear put together and, you know, I know all the answers, but I think there's a lot of power in normalizing, you know, you don't have to be well put together all the time, you know. And so, I mean, is that something that you guys would agree with as well?
Yes, definitely. I feel like I've always had this pressure that I felt on myself, not even from others, that I have to be perfect. I have to know everything, do everything. But even like the lockdown, whole 2020 situation has made me realize that you don't have to always be put together. You can let yourself step back from your life and kind of have a look and check out your priorities again and make sure that your mental health is in check, essentially.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. What about you, Sophie?
Yeah, wow, I've reflected on that during lockdown too, and that often we can be our own harshest critic without even realizing it, or put all this pressure on ourselves. And something that I actually kind of took away from the Y25 hui was that often I just ask myself, well, what's next, Sophie? What's your next big project? What's your next area that you're going to enter into? What's your kind of your next move? But I'm actually feeling really content, and I think we need to normalize feeling content and not having to make, you know, the next year after the biggest year and always be leveling up, because leveling up can look so different for so many people, and our journeys will all look different, and all at different stages and different times. And so yeah, trying to normalize that, and also normalizing the kind of roller coaster that is life. And we will have good days and bad days, and we'll have days where everything feels like it's going awesome, and we'll have days when, you know, you dwell on the tiniest of things. That's what happens to me. Some days I'm like, oh my gosh, I stuttered like 3 times when I was trying to speak, and I just wish I could get my point across more coherently, and all of those little things. And some days where that doesn't bother me at all. So I think trying to normalize that, and also for me, like staying really connected to why I'm doing this, even if sometimes some of the things or some of the situations I'm in, some of the things that I'm doing make me feel nervous or evoke feelings of anxiety. Just remembering why, and remembering the kind of people that we're trying to help, and the planet that we're trying to help, and the kinds of things that will hopefully come to fruition with all of our work if we just continue and find people around us who can support us, even if we might not be able to support ourselves at some moments in our lives. And I think too, this also sounds quite cliche, but just remembering that life's short and we only have a limited amount of time that we're around for, and we might as well do what we can with it, and not spend time. Another thing that I've kind of been living by at the moment is, if it's not going to matter in 5 years, don't worry about it for more than 5 minutes. And that kind of puts it into perspective too. Like some things that I dwell on, or that I let replay in my head, that just takes up energy, and we've only got a limited amount of energy that we can allocate to things in a day. So I think we just have to be intentional and recognize some of those kind of things that might, or like some of those habits or routines that might play out within our head that might not be reality, and just being aware of those and surrounding ourselves with people who help to break those down.
I think just jumping in really quickly on that, Sophie, I think that you touched on a really good point around this whole what's next idea. And I know that that often is something that I resonate with when I go, if I win an award or if I get a really cool opportunity, I go, cool, done that, tick the box. What's next? What can I do next? And I don't take the moment or the opportunity to stop and savor it and go, that was a really cool opportunity. Let's just have a bit of a self-reflection, a bit of a debrief on that and really acknowledge what I've done. It's for that I need to go, okay, cool, I've got that award. What award can I get next? Or what cool thing can I do next? I don't just stop and pause. And I think what a lot of us do, we just want to keep going and going and going.
And I think part of that is kind of this perception of what we think other people are thinking of us, because it's like if we win an award, well, we just assume that people around us are like, oh, she's successful and I'm sure she's going to go on to do great things and win so many other awards and have access to so many other opportunities. But I think often we forget that people are so engrossed in their own lives, and what we're just so we can kind of be paying attention to what we think other people might be perceiving of us and of our successes, but actually like people are out there living their own lives too. So it can be so easy to I get stuck in that so often too, Courtney. It's real mission to get out of.
Yeah, I definitely agree with both of you as well. And it can be really exhausting when you get stuck in the cycle of thought and you start to feel as if there's always a high expectation of you awaiting what you've done. And I can feel quite tired from that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I want to thank you guys all for your vulnerability. I know it's not easy, jumping on a live webinar and opening up about these type of things. So I'm really proud to be in the presence of such amazing wāhine toa. And I'm really grateful to be having this conversation with you. And so moving on a little bit, we've just enjoyed a very interesting weekend, election weekend. And so I wanted to put it out there. What are your guys' thoughts around the election result? And what would you like to see most from this new government? I think we'll start with you, Sophie, and then join in as we go on.
Cool. Yeah, my thoughts on the election results. We definitely saw some really big wins, I think, for our country with the re-election of our awesome Prime Minister and wāhine toa Jacinda Ardern. And linking back to the first or second question around reflections during lockdown too, I felt so grateful that we had such an awesome, compassionate and kind leader through that period, and also now continuing to lead us through the recovery. So really awesome that we've got her as a wāhine to look up to. For me as well, in the area that I live, I supported the first ever Pacifica woman to get elected in the electorate that I live. So that was an awesome win for our community. It's been a national seat since 2008, but we managed to, for the first time, the first Pacifica or Māori woman who had stood in the electorate, and the first woman to be elected there. So that was a huge win for our community, and I can't wait to see the kinds of people that she, and the kinds of voices, that she will bring into Parliament. And I think the kind of wins for Auckland Central, getting Chloe Swarbrick in there as an underdog, no one really saw that coming, I don't think. I was so hopeful, and that was kind of one of the races that I was following the closest over the weekend. I think one of the things that I want from the government, though, is bold action on climate change, for the government to truly recognise the climate crisis, but also not only just to recognise it, but to take action, but through that action being able to work alongside the farming community, to work alongside those whose jobs will be affected by any radical action on climate change, and the kind of fast-paced action that we need in order to make sure that those people's lives and livelihoods are respected and continued in the kind of way that they are now, because I do think that we have to bring the whole of Aotearoa on board as much as we can, without compromising those gains that we need for our planet. So that's a really interesting conversation that needs to be had. I'm really hoping that Jacinda will go with the Greens, and maybe even a confidence and supply agreement with the Māori Party. It's awesome to see them back in Parliament. I'm extremely excited about that. So I would love to see Jacinda kind of use this kindness and this platform that she's created through her ability to be compassionate and kind to really make some bold and transformational decisions. And I feel like at the moment she's been very open about being aspirational, and these are the kinds of visions we have for New Zealand, and we want to govern for every single person in New Zealand. But I think there will have to be some tough decisions and conversations to be had if we want to make sure that we're doing the best by our people and our planet, and that'll hopefully come over the next 3 years. So I'm excited to see those conversations unfold, and to see how we can all be a part of those conversations as well, and involve young people and activists in our lives, and all of those things too.
Absolutely. What about you, Courtney? How did you find election weekend?
I enjoyed the election weekend from the perspective that I got to vote on Stewart Island, so that was really, really exciting to me. And just even going through Southland and traveling around there for work for the last week, being able to have conversations with people obviously on the other side of the country and hearing what some of their values are and what they were hoping from the election. And for me, my main thing, and it does continue, is around the support of young people and around the support of our primary industries. And I think echoing what Sophie was saying, we all want to make sure that our climate is sustainable, that we can keep climate change or negative climate change to a real minimum and really build on some of the success that we've had to still create that product and to create that really high value export, but really being aligned with our climate whilst doing so. And I think speaking to some of the farmers in those areas as well, they want what's best for the environment, because by having a safe environment, that means that their stock is safe, that their product is still viable for the market. And at the end of the day, we all want to make sure that our environment can continue and our climate can still be safe for us all to live in. But I think on the other hand, playing a little bit of devil's advocate here, sometimes people in those sort of real rural isolated communities see people in Wellington making these big calls and they say, how does it affect me? Down here, this doesn't impact me. Do I care that the Harbour Bridge is going to have an extra lane or not? No, in Southland we need this, and this. And I think coming out of Auckland myself and looking at it from a far lens, being able to see some of the impacts that sort of Wellington, that Parliament, the Beehive can have on these smaller communities. And I hope that with our MP system, that our MPs in those areas can really stand for who they represent and really think about their community and the area first and foremost, while still contributing to some of those real global conversations, but not really forgetting who they're representing and making sure that those policies that are going ahead are supporting the people around them first and foremost.
Yeah, and what about you, Tulsi?
Well, this was my first election that I could vote in here in New Zealand, and I felt it was really exciting to have a say in what we wanted our new government to do for us in the future, and kind of have a better engagement in the youth community as well as to what we want our youth community. Especially here in Christchurch, we have a lot of groups that are kind of focused, like we have the Young Labour group here at UC, and I found this election was very good to see the perspective of the youth, especially because I was voting. And I definitely agree with Sophie as what I want from this new government is better action on the climate, definitely, and definitely more action in the migrant area, because we want to be able to support the world and bring in more migrants to New Zealand and allow our community to grow, which is probably one of my biggest priorities this election. And I think that Labour would be really good if they collaborate with the Greens, especially, so that we can kind of focus on youth, migrant, and the climate.
Awesome. No, absolutely. I'm really glad we have such a diverse panel, and I want to thank you, Courtney, because that is not something that I had actually ever considered before. You know, I've been a townie basically my whole life, and so hearing from the rural aspect, I think that is really important. You know, they are some of the key players in our country's economy, and their perspectives definitely do deserve to be heard. Yeah, no, so totally that's awesome. I guess for me, one of the things a couple of things that I was really happy to see was, of course, Chloe making Auckland Central. That was awesome. As well as the Māori Party, you know, making a comeback in the prelims. That was a very proud moment for me. And I did want to bring that up because, you know, our last election, unfortunately, the Māori Party didn't get in. And I know for a lot of Māori throughout Aotearoa, it did hurt because it kind of felt like, you know, the Māori interests weren't being represented in Parliament. And so, yeah, no, seeing the comeback it's an awesome feeling. And so staying on the election vibe, what are your guys' thoughts on the voting age? You know, I know that's a hot topic at the moment. You know, do you guys think that the voting age should be lowered, or, you know, will it help older people really hear and act on what young Kiwis really want and need? What do you think, Tulsi?
I think that there could be a benefit in lowering the voting age slightly, like maybe to 16 or 17, because I think that would be the age where we become aware of global issues and how it's impacting us in New Zealand. And we get a better understanding of our community and its needs. Because I know at age 16, I started to become much more aware of where I lived, what my actions were impacting in my community, and what I could ask of others who were in a position of power to do to make us better off as a community. And I think having the perspective of those younger, slightly younger than us generation could help kind of attain our goals for the future, including like climate justice, equality with women's rights. And I think there could be a benefit in lowering the voting age.
Yeah, cool. What about you, Courtney?
I think it's interesting, and I haven't really educated myself around this as best as I know that I should have. And I think it was interesting. This was my third election at 24. I've had the opportunity to vote in 3 different elections, and funnily enough, I voted for a different party every single time. So I think my views have definitely changed from age 18 to 24. And I even remember being 18, and I know this is terrible to admit, that I was really influenced by my family living at home, thinking, what are they going to be voting for? Who are they going to be voting for? They've had my best interest at heart, so surely I should be aligning my vote with theirs. And I think the more I sort of developed and got older and had different life experiences, my perspectives were able to be influenced by these different experiences and opportunities. And that got me voting for different people at different times, because my values were changing. And I think it'll really cement, if we were to lower the voting age to somewhere like 16 or 17, what the values of that particular generation are at that particular time. And it's not to say at the end of the day that this is a party that they're going to vote for the rest of their lives, but it could be an interesting perspective and an interesting insight, because a lot of the politicians and groups in our society say, we want to hear from these people. So if we give them the chance and then we find that they go, oh, we don't want to hear from them anymore, it all seems very cool and trendy to say we want to hear from a youth voice. But when push comes to shove and we do, that's when I think it starts to scare some people. So I think it'll be interesting if we were to lower it, to see if that shifts any of the election results or anything like that, if there's any sway.
Yep, no, absolutely. And I think, regardless of whether the age is lowered or not, there is a huge importance in civics education, having civics education in our school curriculums, because I was a little bit the same when I was eligible to vote in my first year of university. I was kind of like, maybe I'll just vote for who my parents are voting for. And what would have been really awesome was if I kind of had that background in school where, I knew about the policies, I knew about the historical factors, so that I could make an informed decision. So yeah, what do you think, Sophie?
Yeah, I'm personally all for lowering the voting age. And I think the main thing, so this was the first general election that I've been able to vote in. And because the voting age is 18, for some people that might mean that they don't vote in their first general election until they're 19 or 20, just because of where the 3-year cycle kind of fits in with their birthday. But I think there's a huge bonus in terms of lowering it to 16, where people are voting when they're potentially between the ages of 16 and 18 or 19, where you're voting in an environment where you're more supported and you've got people around you to have these conversations with that because when people turn 18, they often move out of their communities to go somewhere for university, like in Kapiti. I'm one of the only people my age, there's a few of us, but most people move out of Kapiti to a bigger city because there's no tertiary education provider here. So I think if you've got people voting when they're 16, you've got that support system around them, whereas when you turn 18 and you're moving out of home, you're moving to uni, there's so many changes happening in your life. If you're adding kind of the responsibility to then vote for who will lead your country, that's another responsibility and another huge change when you're 18. So I think trying to stage some of that a little bit, along with obviously the fact that we've seen so many people 16 and younger actually engage themselves with these processes now. And I know people who are 14, who are 12 even, who are involved with the School Strike for Climate, who are just as educated as someone who might be a whole lot older. And I think that that's no longer can really be used as an argument against it. And I think we're seeing that a whole lot less now, because we have seen movements of young people sweep the globe, but also sweep Aotearoa too. So I'm fully for it. And yeah, I think it would be awesome, as Courtney was saying, to kind of see how that would influence our results, our election results. I also think something important to note as well is that if you vote in the first election, you're eligible, you're far more likely, research suggests that you're far more likely to vote continuously in the elections that follow. So if we can get young people voting at 16, while they're in that kind of environment where they have civics education available to them, while they've got their kind of cohort of friends that they've potentially been friends with since primary school and into high school, then that might mean that we actually see a larger voter turnout across generations, because that'll just continue to filter through as those people get older. And then if we just keep, so I reckon it's a good idea.
And even jumping, I was just going to say what you were saying for what Eddie was saying, as well as Tulsi and Sophie, and I think it's around the education is really, really important, because we want to provide that youth voice and we want to encourage that, and we want to see that reflected in our polls. But at the same time, if we're encouraging people who are 16, 17 below the current voting age to vote, then we're also, without educating them, we're encouraging the vote of perhaps an older generation who we may be wanting to sort of dilute that vote or dilute their opinions by bringing in a young vote. But if we're not educating those people, it's just going to reflect from an older generation, which perhaps is not what we're wanting to do. So definitely around education, but yeah, all for bringing in those other perspectives.
Yep, for sure. And I just thought super quickly, this wouldn't be a Gen Z panel without bringing up technology. I think technology has done some amazing things. Our previous generation, they were the mobile pioneers and we're the mobile natives. So I just wanted to quickly ask you guys, what are some of the challenges in regards to technology that you see moving forward? I know that we have seen a lot of things like, cyberbullying and perhaps some exciting things like AI, but what are your guys' thoughts around the approaching, I guess, technological development coming? We'll start with you, Sophie.
Oh, I was just thinking, wow, that's a big question. I think, that whole aspect of cyberbullying, kind of the rise of social media, and also, I guess, the dependence on social media, but also the ability that social media has to kind of create false expectations of how people are living their life, and the kinds of things that we're kind of like perceived that we should aspire to, and all of those kinds of things, where we that kind of adds to the imposter syndrome conversation as well, and some of those anxieties that we might be feeling and the comparisons we're making between ourselves and others. So I think it can definitely be seen as a tool for good if we harness it, but then watching The Social Dilemma on Netflix and kind of the way that technology has been able to harness our data and use it, where we're kind of like products in the system, and our time is literally being sold to these corporations that are able to manipulate our data and use it however they wish to, for their own benefit really, and for their own monetary gain, I think is really dangerous. So I do think that the conversation needs to 100% ramp up, because the conversation on the other side is definitely ramping up about how we can get things quicker and bigger and faster, and all of these different things around how we develop technology, and kind of see a huge rise in technology. But I also think to kind of counter that and to balance the conversation, there does need to be some kind of dialogue around, well, what are the benefits of technology, and how can we harness that for people? Because ultimately technology is a tool for people, and sometimes it really does feel like it's not being used for that, it's being used against people, and for people to kind of be products in this system of it just doesn't, there are elements of it that I'm concerned about, but I also have seen the benefits that it's had for movements like Civil Strike for Climate, and its ability to kind of harness that passion and to spread the message, I guess, of what we're doing. So I haven't really given it a whole lot of thought, but those are my initial thoughts.
Absolutely, and I think part of the amazing voter turnout we had could be due in part to, every time I'd log on Instagram, I'd see vote, vote, vote. And so I'd be like, okay, I need to go vote. Whereas, maybe previous generations weren't always exposed to that type of thing. And so there's definitely some positive aspects to, technology and the wave that we're essentially riding. What about you, Tulsi and Courtney? Do you have any other last thoughts in regards to technology?
I feel like technology has almost become an extension of ourselves, and one of the problems I see arising in the future is being able to disconnect and just have some time to yourself. I already feel that it's very hard to step away from work when you're always connected to the internet, you're always connected to people. And even though Zoom has brought in so many new benefits, it's basically made our home our workplace now. So I think there are going to be implications with that, and allowing ourselves to take a break could be harder in the future, especially with mental health. It could be difficult to step back and kind of log off when you're always connected to the internet.
Yeah.
Definitely. And what you were saying, Tulsi, and building on that idea of being able to disconnect, I know that I find that a struggle myself. It's just one quick work email, let me just respond to this, and then next thing I know, it's almost midnight and I'm deep down this rabbit hole of work that I really could wait till the morning. And I think also the idea of technology can really highlight the disparity gap that we've got, and highlighting the inequality in certain communities. And if everything's sort of online, everything requires technology, who are we going to leave behind? Who isn't going to be able to join us on that technology journey, which I think can be quite troubling. So making sure that as we advance technology, we enhance accessibility for technology. It's really key.
For sure. No, absolutely. I think all the points that you guys have raised have been on point. That was an accidental play on words, but I've really enjoyed speaking with you guys today. Tulsi, Courtney, Sophie, you've been amazing. It's incredible to be a part of your community. And so now I'm going to welcome back Delwyn. But yeah, just on behalf of all of us, for those that are watching, it's been a pleasure to share our insights with you today. And no doubt we will catch some of you in the future. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, girls, thank you so much. We've been just in the presence for the last hour of, I think, some fresh wisdom, which is the wonderful benefit of youth, that you do look at things freshly and differently. There's concerns about your generation coming through about resilience, but all the things you've talked of this morning, I think, really echo how resilient your generation actually is. And just to acknowledge your generosity in being vulnerable and stepping up and sharing your perspective and your view. It's just been wonderful. So ngā mihi, thank you so much. And I think that's us for today.
Awesome. Okay, cool. And just on a last point, if anybody wanted to reach out to any of us, I know that we're all across social media. So I'm going to give everyone their little 5 to 10 seconds to quickly mention where you can find them and reach out. I know you can find both Global Women and YWCA, of course, on old Google. As for myself, I'm on LinkedIn and Instagram. And I'm just going to hand over to Sophie, who can hand over to the others to share where you can connect with them as well.
Cool, awesome. Yep, I'm also on LinkedIn and Instagram, and have a website that I developed for my campaign. So if you just search up Sophie Handford, you'll be able to find my website, which has my contact email and everything on it. Courtney, what about you?
Yeah, so I'm on the good old LinkedIn as well, just under Courtney Davies. Some of my agricultural projects are on Facebook. If you search up Northern Agricultural Youth, as well as Inca Ashes, you can follow along with some of our agricultural journey there, as well as on Instagram at Courtsmoo. Tulsi?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn as well, and Tulsi Lathia on Instagram. And I've also got another account for my multicultural cookbook, Spoonful of Spice, on Instagram. So if you want to give that a follow, it's all good.
I'm really happy to connect anyone if they want to come through me. I absolutely can do that.
Perfect. Okay, well, a massive thank you again for tuning in and listening to all of us. I know that we're all super grateful to have spent this time with each other, and have an amazing rest of your day to everyone listening, to my amazing friends on the panel, Delwyn, Courtney, Sophie, and Tulsi. Thank you so much for joining in.
Thanks, girls.
Thanks so much.